Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, everyone.
To another FPC NFL Sunday. Got a little echo in my ear there. I don't know if you folks heard it, but it certainly distracted me there for a second. But no, we are here live. It is November the 21st. We are getting ready for Week 11 Sunday. Got a lot of great games going on, and a lot of big games going on with a lot of implications. Some big news player-wise. But the biggest news coming into this weekend, gentlemen, is, and maybe I'm a little biased. But I think the New England Patriots are once again a force to be reckoned with. Agree or disagree?
I would definitely agree, just because I think it's it's in an ultimate team sport. They're doing things right now that I think you just you take away the best players like they always have, like Belichick has, but it just seems like total domination at this point. So I think you mentioned before we got on here how many points allowed they've had in the last 5 games, and it's just it's something that's exciting to watch in a league where sometimes we focus on offense all the time.
Yeah, to me, the defense is still is obviously one of the top 5 units in the NFL. Just look at, as Braden said, the last 5 games. Look at their domination of 3 different quarterbacks against a bad Falcons team. I just feel bad for Matt Ryan watching that game because he's got nothing there at all. But I think for me with the AFC, it's just all about matchups. You got to get the right matchup, because if you run to the Patriots in January with this defense and you think Mac Jones is going to figure it out, it's like getting the ball more downfield at some point. I think the offense kind of hit a little bit of snags on Thursday, albeit a short week. For me, I still need to see them, particularly next week in Tennessee, before I say Super Bowl contender, but definitely in the mix to win a playoff game and make a deep run in January.
Yeah, and I think the deep throw concerns are a bit overstated and a little misguided, in my opinion. I think he has the ability to do it. It's very clear that the Patriots are taking a gradual approach with him. I mean, you can see it by virtue, inside individual games and just so far during this season. So, the important thing is for Mac is not to get too overwhelmed with just too much information or trying to do too much. So what are the Patriots doing? Well, they're taking a more cautious approach. It doesn't mean that they don't trust him deep. I mean, clearly he can throw the ball deep. We've seen him make some pretty darn good throws. And, I got into someone with someone on Twitter about throwing the ball past 10 yards or whatever, because that's kind of like the key number these days. And, they were criticizing Mac for going 3 of 6 this past week with an interception. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, well, if you're going to criticize him, let's take a look at some of the quote unquote big throwers. And I don't mean to pick on him, but he was center of the conversation. You go to Patrick Mahomes, who does throw the ball deep more often. He throws the ball more each game anyways, but he was completing below 50% of those passes. So the argument being is it's not necessary all the time to just huck the ball downfield. There's been no situation in the history of the NFL where that's been the foundation for winning a lot and winning Super Bowls. It's just, it's a flashy play. Again, it's mostly something that attracts the eyes and ears and everything of the fantasy football player. But the reality of it is, especially in this game, the running game was just on point. I mean, you have Ramondre Stevenson, you had Damian Harris, both running very well. And had it not been for a couple penalties, offensive holding and whatnot, their stat lines would have looked far more impressive too. So the game plan was simple. They dominated on the ground game, and Mac Jones was incredibly efficient. He made that interception. I think he kind of got a little bit too full of himself or a little bit too ahead of himself, floated the pass, and it got intercepted. It happens. He's a rookie. I'm not going to sit there and say all of a sudden come to the conclusion that he can't throw deep. But to the point of this conversation, though, the bigger picture, the Patriots in general, this defense is pretty darn impressive. And each week it's getting harder and harder not to consider them one of the 2 or 3 best in the league at this point. I don't think there's too many teams that have played as consistently across the board. And what they do is the recipe for what they do. It's a recipe for success. They rush the quarterback and they create turnovers in the secondary and also obviously from the front 7. I mean, Matt Judon is a force to be reckoned with on this defense. I know he only registered a half a sack the other night, but he was all over the field. He has 10.5 on the season already, which is a career best for him, and far more than what the Patriots have gotten the last couple years. They only had 24 as a team last year. They have 28 already through 11 games. So I think the biggest thing is a really good defense in this situation and a pretty good offense that's pretty efficient and doesn't turn the ball over often. So that's a pretty good recipe for success in football, especially when you have a conference that's pretty wide open. I mean, I like Tennessee. To Ricky's point, this is going to be a big week going into Sunday. The Patriots playing the Titans. That's going to be if I'm not fully in on the Patriots yet, if they go in and win that game, I think a lot of people are going to start changing their mind and opinion on what the actual ceiling for this team is.
But I think also,
go ahead, Ricky.
I think to the point you were bringing up Ian earlier, I'm not asking Mac Jones to throw the ball 50 yards. I don't think he has to. What I mean is kind of the intermediate 15 to 20 yarder, because I feel like if you get to late December, early January, and you get the wind and all that stuff, and Mac didn't really play in a lot of wind at Alabama, you kind of have to be able to at least throw it at least inside the middle of the field in a sense. And you kind of saw it with the whole throw the Hunter Henry, then he basically threw the exact same pass to Jonnu Smith. And that's the thing. They also need Jonnu Smith to kind of get going a little bit. He has not been the same guy this year because the running game is great. And Brandon Bolden's been a good surprise. But at the same time, you kind of want to see Aguilar starting to find it again. Bourne's been great. Myers has been good. It's just something of when the running game gets prepared for in January, can Mac hit a throw, maybe not 50 yards, but 20 to 25? Mm-hmm. If he could do that, then your margin for error isn't as much because you said it, even with holding penalties. The holding penalties could also be drive killers in the playoffs. They have to kind of clean that up a little bit, even though, again, short week. So going 22 for 26 on a short week is nothing to sneeze at either.
Yeah, and I just wanted to go back to the defense, and Ian brought up Matt Judon, and really you look at the deal they signed him for is kind of a steal at this point. I think like 16 or 16.5 million per season. And it's kind of funny how, Belichick finally went out and spent all this money in free agency, and it's truly paying off. Of course, they brought some guys back like Kyle Van Noy, but I mean, all the additions they made, I just remember how much people were kind of laughing at some of the moves they made, and it's really coming through right now. So that's going to be an interesting thing to look back at come playoff time.
Yeah, when it comes to Matt Judon, I mean, when it comes to a Patriot type player, he kind of fits the bill. He's endeared himself already into the culture, quote unquote, and just everything about it. So for him, and then you think about the rookies like Christian Barmore, who's making an impact, Devin Godchow, who's had a big game on Sunday or on Thursday. So there's a lot of talent on this team. Of course, the pressing need would be to eventually sign J.C. Jackson to a long-term deal, and every week that passes, that dollar figure just goes up and up and up. But I think this should, give some Patriot fans some little easier sleep at night, considering the panic that they went through, with some of these moves. Belichick can still draft pretty darn well, and he's a hell of a coach, and he recognizes talent. So, So through 11 weeks, it looks like the Patriots are on their way back. And if you're looking on the screen here, you can see the AFC division standings and standings overall. You can see the Patriots leading the AFC East in wins, technically a few percentage points behind the Bills for first place, but they will get a chance to take first place from the Bills if they both go into week 13 with the same record. So big news, though, and potentially big news coming from the AFC North today. Big Ben is back. He has missed the last 2 games, Mason Rudolph in his stead, but the Baltimore Ravens could potentially be without Lamar Jackson today. How big of a loss? They're coming off a pretty bad loss against the Dolphins on Thursday Night Football, and to come into this week without Lamar Jackson, that could spell difficulty for the Ravens, who are now all of a sudden in a pretty tight race in this division, with Pittsburgh nipping at their heels and Cincinnati and even Cleveland not too far behind with 5 wins apiece. So, Braden, I'll start with you. How big of a loss potentially could Lamar Jackson be to this Ravens team?
Yeah, I think it's huge just because I think this year he's had to kind of do even more on his own, kind of a little bit more that they're kind of relying on from him. And you look at everything they've lost this year injury wise. I mean, just offensively, both offensive tackles are now gone, and you look at the running backs that they've lost with injury. Marquise Brown will not play today, so I think there's a lot of pressure to kind of just for him make the right play or decision every time, even more than he had to before. And I think in a game where you look at Chicago, they did lose to the Steelers last game, but they're coming off a game I think where they kind of feel like they can battle with anybody almost right now. And yeah, it's gonna be huge. I think if Lamar misses today, just because, like you said, coming off that loss, that's going to be even more difficult, I think, for the players that are actually playing today around him to kind of come back from without him.
I think it's somewhat of a big deal, but at the same time, you look at this Ravens defense, and I know they gave a couple of big plays on Thursday to Tua the previous Thursday. They still only gave up, essentially, if you take the defensive score away, 15 points. So this is still a really good defense, although at times it struggled, especially against the Bengals. But you also remember the Bears don't have Allen Robinson today. So Justin Fields really doesn't have – he's got Darnell Mooney, but what else does he really have in the passing game? Montgomery's back. I think it's one of those games where sometimes you just have to win ugly. And for the Ravens, who I believe are getting Latavius Murray back today, so that should help their running game a little bit. It is a concern. I think Lamar will play. What's concerning to me is a lot of time we've seen Lamar miss a lot of practices this year with illnesses. And I know they're not COVID related, but it just seems weird that he seems to be having illness, like not weekly, but I feel like I've seen it a lot this year. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that way. We would have to check to be sure because sometimes perception isn't always the reality. But, he does, I do feel like he has missed practices. I don't know generally for what across the season, but he has missed practices. And obviously the concern with a guy like Lamar Jackson, and always has been, is his health. And you throw this extra wrinkle into it that his, health outside of just physical health, as it pertains to playing football, and especially the way he plays, that could be concerning for the Ravens, who, as much as I like their defense, they really are a team that goes with Lamar Jackson. If Lamar Jackson's at the top of his game, they're winning football games. If he's not, they're in dogfights and pretty, 50-50 when it comes to games like that. So, they don't have the Ravens defense of the early 2000s anymore, or even some of the Ravens defenses from, say, 2012 that could, dominate a football game and win you games that way. I'd be concerned just because, again, I mean, this AFC race is so tight that just him missing a week or two and potentially the Ravens losing another game or two could be the death knell for this team and certainly their Super Bowl hopes. Because, again, I mean, you look at this Pittsburgh Steelers, and I don't think, I'm not a huge fan of what the Steelers do, but maybe they go on a little bit of a run here. Big Ben comes back, maybe he plays some pretty good football, and they win a few games. All of a sudden, the Steelers could win this division. And the Ravens, already probably looking up at several teams like the Bills and maybe the Chiefs after this week, could have a pretty difficult path to the playoffs if that's not the case. So I'd be pretty concerned. But again, this is anticipating him not play. We haven't had any indication yet that they're leaning one way or the other. But it's definitely something to monitor and keep an eye on. Another thing that I noticed, and maybe you guys can clear this up for me, and we're going to shift to the NFC real quick. I saw that Aaron Rodgers is apparently dealing with a fairly, I don't want to call it significant toe injury, but certainly a toe injury that apparently is going to probably linger with him throughout the rest of the season. He returned last week against Seattle, didn't look too sharp. I mean, he was on the COVID list for 10 days, missed a lot of time. So that's reasonable and expected to be a little bit rusty. No Aaron Jones today, who I personally think is perhaps, if not on par, perhaps even more so important to the success of this team will not be playing. You add in the wrinkle that Aaron Rodgers may or may not be injured. He missed practice time again this week, so he really hasn't practiced much the last 3 weeks or so. Going up against a divisional team on the road against Minnesota, are we worried about the Packers here? Because I think a lot of people were looking at them as potentially the best team in the NFC, but outside of their defense, that I don't know if there's anything I'd be willing to bet on right now, considering some of the news and some of the potential injury problems at the quarterback position. So what do you think, Braden?
Yeah, it's interesting, I guess, just with the style of play when you consider that injury for Rodgers. Not a guy that has to necessarily have the best platform or base every time, can kind of throw it off his back foot and have a lot of success. But if you go back to some of his worst games this year, I mean, he was really missing with his timing more than anything. I mean, that first loss against the Saints, and then even last week against Seattle, that was something that stood out to me. So that's something that you talk about with the receiver depth kind of being a little questionable. And right now, Davante Adams isn't necessarily the hottest receiver that we're used to. It is a pretty interesting injury for Rodgers to have. And I think you look at the offense as a whole, it's I don't know. I think it's almost like an identity crisis thing when you look at the difference between Jones and AJ Dillon. I'm still kind of skeptical on Dillon overall, but yeah, I think overall the Vikings do have a good shot today, just because I think you look at how Kirk Cousins and that offense are playing right now. I think Rodgers is going to be tested to have a big output today.
The Packers may have their issues, but if you look at the NFC, who doesn't have their issues right now? The Cardinals may have Colt McCoy for the third game in a row. The Rams forgot that you actually have to run the ball, and just because you have a high-powered offense, you actually have to be balanced. Tampa's lost 2 straight. The Cowboys without Amari Cooper today and Tyron Smith today. So really, it's just going to become who survives and who actually stays healthy that gets that 1 seed, because those top 5 are, I won't say even, but close to even. You kind of going to have to get that top spot. The problem is the 6 and 7s in the NFC can't exactly challenge between New Orleans and Carolina and Minnesota. And it's just a weird top 5. And I think the Packers at least still have A.J. Dillon. They still have Davante Adams. They still have Aaron Rodgers, a good defense. And it's one of those things where I think right now it's between them and the Cowboys, because you look at Arizona. If Kyler doesn't play today, they do have a bye next week, but after the bye, they host the Rams. That's a weird game to get Kyler Murray back for.
Yeah, I thought I was on mute. Yeah, I was on mute. Yeah, so I agree with you, Ricky. I think there's all those teams are flawed in different ways, which makes it, you know what I mean? They're not it's not like, oh, you have 3 or 4 great offensive teams and bad defensive teams. No, you have some really good offensive teams that have some really fatal flaws. Even the best offensive teams in this league have some fatal flaws. You look at Arizona, who I think a lot of people, were looking at as potentially the best team. Without Kyler Murray, they're less dynamic. Are they going to be able to compete with some of these better teams in the conference? I'm not quite sure how long he's out. I mean, I didn't think he was going to miss this, a couple games like he has, but then again, I didn't quite know too much about the injury. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with that, how it plays out. Like you said, Tampa's obviously lost 2 games in a row. They got to figure out how to stop taking penalties and playing like they're, they're playing like the 7-9 team that they've been for the previous 15 years prior to Brady's arrival. Green Bay, again, their defense has been pretty awesome the last few weeks. The offense being, good enough. That's the thing. It wasn't like this was a high-powered offense before Aaron Rodgers missed time. It was a pretty good offense. Nothing crazy. It was more or less a balanced team, which I think gives a lot of credence to why I think the Green Bay Packers right now are probably the best team in the NFC. Don't sleep on Carolina. They do have a pretty good defense, and they seem to be very streaky. So maybe they win a couple games here. Maybe they get energized with Cam Newton there and the defense playing really well. Minnesota, I think they've lost all their games by less than a point or less than a touchdown or something like that. So they've been in pretty much every game. I think they've led by at least a touchdown in every single game this season and are somehow 4-5. So I wouldn't sleep on those teams necessarily, but it could get murkier this weekend if some of these top teams lose again. And all of a sudden you just have a mash of teams sitting with like 6 or 7 wins. Could get pretty interesting down the stretch here in the NFC. So, and real quick, you can, actually it's not up right there. I'll pull it up and there we go. There's the AFC Playoff Pitcher as current as today. Tennessee is still the number 1 seed, Pittsburgh and the Chargers rounding out the bottom with the Patriots, Chiefs, Ravens, and Bills in between. And in the NFC, you have the Packers, like I said, at the number 1 spot with Carolina rounding out the 7 teams there at number 7, the Saints, Rams, Buccaneers, Cowboys, and Cardinals as well. So as we do every single week, and as we have a lot of fun doing, we like to do props. And our friends over at Pickup over there, Pickup HQ, you can follow them on Twitter. I noticed that they changed the handle, so I want to make sure that I get it right and people actually are able to follow them. So let me see here. I'm going to bring them up because we have quite a few for us here today, just because I figured it'd be a lot of fun and there's a lot of good discussion to be had. So here we go. As I stall to bring it up, and finally, voila, our first prop of the day. You have Antonio Gibson, Christian McCaffrey. Who has more rushing yards in Week 11? I'll start with you, Braden.
I'll go McCaffrey in this one just because I think last week was pretty fluky for Washington. I mean, Gibson has not gotten consistently a lot of touches this year. I think it'll be more of a game where they'll have to chase points with McKissick. So I think McCaffrey has more rushing today.
I'm going to go with McCaffrey as well. I think Gibson can have a decent performance. I mean, he showed good signs, especially in that final drive against Tampa Bay, a good run defense last week. I do think this game will be close, so I think Gibson's going to get some yards. But you could clearly see Christian McCaffrey plays a different type of game with Cam Newton as opposed to Sam Darnold and PJ Walker. So give me McCaffrey.
Yeah, I'll make it a clean sweep and go with Christian McCaffrey as well. Well, I think that was the next one. Yep, that was the next one. All right, number 2. Who will have the most receiving yards in Green Bay, Minnesota? We just talked about this game. Assuming Aaron Rodgers plays, well enough, obviously, if the injury doesn't hinder him, it should be a fairly decent offensive game. Who will have the most receiving yards between this trio or potentially someone else?
I think I'll go with Adam Thielen in this one just because I think they kind of do a good job of moving him around the formation enough. So I think he'll get enough slot snaps to where maybe he's away from Eric Stokes and those outside guys. So I'll say Thielen just because I think he has potentially a big day as far as yards after catch are concerned.
I'll be different. I'll go with Devontae Adams here. I think just because with A.J. Dillon being the sole running back today, or I'm sure Green Bay has other options, but Dillon getting the primary work, I think you'll see more of an emphasis to get the ball to Devontae Adams on the outside. And Minnesota at times can be had defensively in the secondary. So give me Devontae Adams.
All right. So next we have, here we go. Combined touchdowns and Cowboys Chiefs. Obviously, I obviously already made my pick, as you can see on the screen there. I took the under because I do think this might be a little bit more relatively low scoring compared to what I think most people expect this to be. Braden, what do you think? Over, under 8.5 touchdowns in Cowboys Chiefs?
I'm going to go just over on this one. I really, I don't know. I think the Dak is going to have a huge day today. I'm really kind of worried about CeeDee Lamb all day long. So I'll go just over on this one. I do kind of expect a shootout.
I'm going to go under in this game. I'm really concerned with the Dallas Cowboys offense. Look, I know they won a game without Dak Prescott, but now to win a game without Amari Cooper and the Chiefs defense is actually played better over the last 2 weeks. In Kansas City, there's still that turnover issue, and now trying to get Hilaire back into this offense. Will there be some struggles in that regard? So I think, and depending on the weather in Kansas City, I don't have the weather map in front of me, but it is November. It's cold. I think now you're going to maybe get a game that is medium scoring, but not too high scoring. So I'll take the under.
All right. Next, we have, if it works, there we go. Speaking of Edwards-Helaire, over under. 79.5 yards in his return. You like how that worked out pretty nicely, and I'm glad you brought him up because I was just smiling knowing this one was coming up. Braden, we'll start with you as the Chiefs editor for Full Press Coverage and someone who is a very wise Chiefs follower. There are a few, I would say, but I'm not going to get into the ones that I don't agree with. But no, what do you think? Edwards-Helaire was a big part of this offense before his injury. Do you think he's going to have a big day in his return against Dallas?
I'm going to go over here just because I kind of do expect Dallas to play with some light boxes quite a bit in this game. And I think you look at Van Der Esch and Keanu Neal, not necessarily the fastest of guys. And definitely lawn speed isn't necessarily Edwards-Helaire's forte, but I think if they kind of get him in those situations to kind of get outside of the tackles a little more like they did before he got hurt, I think he'll go just over today.
I'm going to go with the under, and it's not because I think Helaire can't pull it off for the reasons Braden suggested. You wonder if there's a pitch count on in terms of how many carries he gets, and there's still a room in this offense for Darrell Williams, who I very quietly can put up some decent numbers, especially you saw last week against Vegas. So with the threat of Darrell Williams, I'll go under.
Right. Next. Bateman's receiving yards over under versus the Bears with again, Lamar Jackson. They're talking about, I just saw an update talking about he's going to try to play today, but apparently he doesn't sound himself, and it seems like this illness is clearly going to impact him, and that's with Marquise Brown out. So over under 80.5.
Wow. I'll go over just because I don't know really if there's besides Mark Andrews much else that whoever plays quarterback is going to lean on today. I kind of expect Baltimore to maybe have to throw it a little more as well, so I'll go over.
Exactly. Unless Sammy Watkins or Devin Duvernay have a rapport with Tyler Huntley, it's hard not to go with the over here. Maybe there's just more short passes. I mean, one of the things you saw against Miami, I know Bateman had a couple of a deep ball or two, but they used the screen game with him as well. So you could kind of be another Hollywood Brown-ish type of guy. Maybe they run the ball, but it's kind of, I think they can be at 81, so it's slightly over, but not confident.
Next, got Michael Carter versus Myles Gaskin. More total yards in Week 11.
Let's go Michael Carter here. I think he's doing a good job lately, quietly playing pretty well for this Jets offense. And kind of another team again, like we talked about with these other ones, I think might have to use him quite a bit in garbage time trailing. So I'll go with Michael Carter.
Go different and go Myles Gaskin. Part of Michael Carter getting yards is going to be actually catching the ball. And I know Robert Saleh was saying, oh, yeah, we have to start Joe Flacco because the Dolphins use zero blitz. I know he wasn't there. I'm not sure if he saw last year's game where Joe Flacco was awful against the Dolphins, and it's kind of the same concept, or it's just something where we can't keep using Mike White because he came back to planet Earth last week. And the Dolphins, if they win this game, that's very quietly getting on a roll. Gaskin can run the football. Jets defense stinks. So give me Gaskin.
Yeah, I'll have to excuse me, I'll have to break the tie here and go with Myles Gaskin as well. Sorry, Braden. Next we have oh yes, this is the big one that we kind of talked about earlier, and I'm kind of throwing it in the middle of our weekly daily props that we like to do. But since everyone's already seen it, and since we already talked about this division somewhat earlier, I'm going to put you guys on the spot. Right now, the Patriots sit at 7-4, the Bills at 6-3. Both of them have both their matchups against each other remaining down the stretch. Who wins this division?
Oh man, I'm gonna stick with Buffalo for now. I definitely thought about taking New England, but I just think right now I expect Buffalo maybe to play a little tighter and play a little bit more high scoring offense down the stretch. So I think that may lead to them playing a little bit better than some expect against New England, but we'll see. I'll go with Buffalo for now.
I don't know who would have benefit of a tiebreaker necessarily, but the only way I could see the Patriots winning this division is if they sweep the Bills. And as much as, because I do think Buffalo is good enough to win one of those games, especially the Monday night game. I feel like that crowd is going to be one of the more hostile crowds because it's one of the biggest games they've had with crowd since the playoff game last year, and they may get more than that depending on capacity things. Buffalo does have Tampa on the road and New Orleans on the road. Besides that, they've got Carolina, Atlanta. They get the Jets week 17. So it comes down to week 17. You can't rely on the Jets to really help the Patriots. Past history, they never do anyway. I'll say I'm going to actually predict it to tie because I don't know tiebreakers. I'll give the edge to the Bills.
Well, I guess I'll be the only one to take the Patriots because I do see, to your point, I do think that they end up splitting with the Bills. Really, it's next week is a make or break game, I think, for the Patriots. If they can beat Tennessee, that would give them a pretty remarkable record in the conference, especially against their contenders. You talk about San Diego, you talk about that's the second time I've done that. You talk about Los Angeles, not the San Diego Chargers. But all of a sudden, you split that with Buffalo. The Patriots close out the season with the Jets and the Dolphins. And despite the better play from the Dolphins of late, I'd say that's a pretty nice soft landing to finish out the season for the Patriots. So I think it really comes down to this Tennessee game. If they can win this game and split with Buffalo, I think the Patriots win the division because I think Buffalo is going to lose pretty bad to Tampa. I know Tampa isn't playing well, but there's just something about Tom Brady going up against Buffalo. I don't care what it is. I just think that Buffalo's going to kind of get run out of the building on that day. So chalk up a couple more losses for Buffalo, and I think it gets a little bit interesting. So I hope I'm right. I really do. Okay, we've already done this one. We're not doing this one again. All right. No, stop. There we go. The league's leading receiver, Deebo Samuel, 108.8 yards per game. Big touchdown catch last week to cap off the 49ers win and win me a much needed fantasy matchup. Thank you very much, Deebo Samuel. I won by 4 points. 49ers, Jaguars. 49ers are playing far better as of late. This seems like it should be a pretty good matchup for them. But a lot of good talent on both sides. Who has the most receiving yards in Week 11?
I'm gonna go George Kittle on this one, just because I think the Jags defense, believe it or not, is a little bit better on the outside as far as the secondary goes. So I think George Kittle, this is the kind of day where you could see maybe a highlight reel stiff arm or just a hurdle where he actually doesn't fumble the football like he did last week. So I'll go with Kittle.
Yeah, I'm going to go Kittle as well. Last I heard, Jaguars defense is awful against tight ends. So go with the tight end here. But to be on I'll take a different name just for fun. I'll take Deebo Samuel. Maybe he catches a screen and runs for like 60 yards like he tends to usually do. So that might help.
That's what I'm going with. That's what I'm saying. And again, part of it is me, a little bit of wishful thinking, knowing that I'm still fighting for my fantasy football life each and every week and having Deebo Samuel on my team. On a team that has DeAndre Hopkins but won't have him this week. It's I need it. So Deebo Samuel, come on Deebo, big fan. So next we have Aaron Rodgers versus Kirk Cousins. We talked about Rodgers. He's potentially dealing with a toe injury. I think Kirk Cousins is having a very quiet, pretty darn good season. Again, it's Kirk Cousins, so I think he's naturally handicapped by just being Kirk Cousins, and he's never going to get any sort of credit like some of these other guys do. But I think there is reason for that because I think you're limited with him. However, proof is in the pudding. He's been playing pretty well. He's at home this time. He's reportedly not dealing with an injury like Aaron Rodgers. So who has more passing yards in this game?
I'll go with Cousins. I usually would say Minnesota's going to run the football and kind of lean on Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison, but I do think they're going to really kind of come out today, try to throw some different things out there, get Green Bay kind of having to think on their feet a little bit. So maybe surprisingly, I'll say Cousins.
Usually the only time the Vikings win these kind of games is if they tend to dominate Aaron Rodgers. And the Packers win these games against Minnesota, they win these games. So if you like Green Bay, you tend to think Rodgers will have more yards. So I just don't trust Minnesota. I maybe you got to trust Kirk Cousins, but I don't trust the Vikings. So Aaron Rodgers is going to hit a couple deep ones. I'll take him.
I'm going to go with Kirk Cousins, and this isn't an indication of whether or not I think Minnesota is going to win this game. I just think, look, for the most part, Aaron Rodgers isn't a last season he was, but he's not really a big yardage guy. Like he doesn't consistently throw a lot. He's not like obviously Brady's up there at like 329. Patrick Mahomes is over 300. I would have to double check Aaron Rodgers' number. Maybe this is an example of maybe perception isn't necessarily reality, but I do think it's reality that he's just he just doesn't throw a lot of yards. And right, you have Aaron Jones, so he's gonna obviously in most cases pick up those yards. No Aaron Jones today. A little bit hampered if you believe the injury issues. So I think Kirk Cousins does. I think he ends up throwing more yards. It doesn't mean I think the Vikings are going to win. This could be in a loss, but I think ultimately he does put up more passing yards than Rodgers in this one. So that is that. So I think our next one is, there we go. Eagles, Saints. 2.5 sacks for the Eagles defense versus the Saints here in week 11. Over or under?
Yeah, I got to go over with both Ryan Ramczyk and Teron Armstead out. It's definitely different having Simeon, a guy that's kind of a little bit more of a rhythm guy. So I think this will be over and probably alone for Josh Sweat in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with over 2.5 here. Probably the same reasons Braden mentioned. I know the Eagles only had 1 sack on Teddy Bridgewater last week, and Philly doesn't play well at home. And I'm tend to look at the Saints and I'm like, they're not as bad as people think. Like if people look at, they lost by 2 to Atlanta, and then really there's a penalty against Tennessee that shouldn't have been called that really changed that game. But I'll go slightly over, but that doesn't mean New Orleans doesn't still have a good chance. I think people are buying Philly a little too quickly.
All right. Next we have. No, we did not do that. I thought for a second, I thought we did this one already. No, we had Deontay Johnson versus Keenan Allen. Who has more receiving yards in week 11?
I'm going to go Keenan, partly because like you did earlier with Debo, I'd take a big fantasy day from Keenan, but also I do think this will actually be more of a Najee Harris game for Pittsburgh as well. So I got to go with Keenan here.
I thought about Deontay Johnson, but I'll go Keenan Allen solely because Pittsburgh's defense is so banged up in this game. TJ Watt, Joe Hayden, Minka Fitzpatrick, basically every big name for the Steelers defense is out or not 100%. And Pittsburgh's going to run. Chargers are going to throw. Give me Keenan Allen.
Yeah, we're gonna make it a clean sweep for Keenan Allen here. So let's see. Lamar Jackson. All right. Again, I put these up before we got more reality of what's happening with him. But assuming he plays, Lamar Jackson. Well, again, maybe you'll make your pick based on the assumption that he doesn't play, and then you'd be pretty darn correct if you pick Justin Fields. But Lamar Jackson versus Justin Fields, who has more rushing yards in week 11?
Let's see. Let's go with Fields here. I think just because right now the last couple of games he has done a pretty good job at starting to show some more urgency and step up quicker and kind of get out into open space. So yeah, I think you're starting to see a little more Ohio State Justin Fields. So I'll go with him.
Outside of the 100-yard rushing game Fields had a couple weeks ago, it's usually around 30 to 40 rushing yards that he tends to average, at least in the last few games. Lamar Jackson does have 120 in a game, but most of the time he'll get about 50 or 60. So even if Lamar tries to play, maybe he breaks a 20, 30-yard run, and that just might be enough with David Montgomery back for Chicago. So I'll take the chance, and I'll go Lamar Jackson. Maybe one big carry, and he leaves, and I still end up getting it right.
Hey, I like that logic, and I'm gonna go with it as well. Although I am gonna have to make some adjustments to my daily fantasy lineup because I don't trust him as my quarterback for the day. I'd like to have a little bit more safer pick. All right, so that's it. So it's going to bring us right to our picks for the week. Obviously, what we do each and every week is we just run through these games, we give our opinion, and if we're right, we'll never let you hear the end of it. If we're wrong, you'll never hear about it again. So we're going to start off right at the top. Pretty good matchup. Indianapolis at Buffalo. Buffalo, again, this is a bit of a gut check time for the Buffalo Bills. A lot of people had penned them in as the winner of the AFC East heading into the season without much competition. All of a sudden, they have competition. How are they going to respond? Well, Indy's not an easy team. I think Buffalo is the better team, but it's no sure thing. I'm going a little fan drunk here, and I'm going with Indianapolis. And I think they pull off the upset because, look, the Colts are capable of playing well, and they have arguably the best running back, especially now with Derrick Henry out for the season, the best running back in the league in Jonathan Taylor, and not the guy from Home Improvement. I might have aged myself a little bit there, but no, the actual running back. Give me the Colts in this one.
I'm going to go Bills just because I think their defense maybe will be a little more trustworthy against Wentz. I know Josh Allen is on the other side, but I think this is a type of game where Wentz, you're really going to start to see the mistakes he had last season, maybe trying to play a little bit too much hero ball. So I'll go with Buffalo in a close one.
We talk about how Titans-Patriots next week is a swing game. I feel like this is a swing game for Buffalo. If they can win this game, if they lose it, now going on a short week to New Orleans, a night game Thursday on Thanksgiving, and then Tampa down the line, New England. Buffalo knows they need this game. They finally reached a step up in competition. The one thing you saw last year in this wild card rematch, Colts dropped a lot of passes for Phillip Rivers. And do you really trust this passing group with Carson Wentz in Buffalo, in the elements? I know it's not bad elements, but it's still upstate New York in November. Give me the Bills. It'll be close, but I trust Josh Allen more than Carson Wentz.
Excuse me. Next, we have Baltimore at Chicago. Again. We talked about Lamar Jackson. He's obviously going to try to play, it seems, but it seems like he's going to be very limited. I picked Baltimore on Friday, and I'm going to stick with my pick. I could be wrong because at the end of the day, if Lamar Jackson doesn't play, Chicago has quite the advantage at home. But at the end of the day, I'm going to stick with Baltimore and say they win this one in a very, very, very close, probably low-scoring game.
I'm going to stick with Baltimore as well. I think this is going to be a kind of game that I think it really comes down to coaching, and I think John Harbaugh, even without Lamar, can kind of find ways to get maybe enough either Justin Tucker field goals or enough takeaways against a rookie to get it done. So Ravens.
Adam Schefter had the tweet about 7 minutes ago. Not just Lamar Jackson, to a non-COVID virus going through the team all week, including Rashad Bateman and their center Bradley Bozeman. I agree, Braden, with Harbaugh. I like him over Nagy, but it just seems this is not Baltimore's week. I wouldn't blame them if they lost this game. I'd be impressed if they won this game. It's in Soldier Field. Montgomery's back for Chicago. Bears are, I think, coming off a bye because they last played against the Steelers and really should have had a chance to win that. Just because everything seems against the Ravens here, I'm going Chicago.
All right. Next, we have Cleveland coming off a thumping at the hands of the New England Patriots last week. But fortunately for them, they get a nice soft landing at home against the Detroit Lions. So although I don't think Cleveland's going to have the sharpest game in the world, I do think that they're going to pull away and win this one against the 0-8-1 Detroit Lions.
I'm going Cleveland as well. I think Nick Chubb being back is the biggest difference for me because I think when you look at without Baker Mayfield played last week, I think it's crucial that Chubb is back. So I think really Stefanski's going to try to get him over 150, maybe 200 yards a day and just kind of wear him out. So Cleveland, I don't think they cover, but I think it's a ugly win here.
DeAndre Swift had 35 carries last week, and the game still ended in a tie. That's how bad the Lions are. If Baker Mayfield loses this game to Tim Boyle, Case Keenum should start a quarterback for the rest of the season, and then you have real doubts if Baker can actually stay the Cleveland quarterback. So for Baker's sake, I'll take the Browns.
Next, we have Tennessee hosting the Houston Texans. On paper, this looks like a mismatch. Perhaps maybe the divisional matchup factors in, and this is a closer game than it should. Maybe Tyrod Taylor has an excellent game against a pretty good Tennessee team. I think their defense is pretty good. It's not what it was a couple years ago, but still a pretty formidable unit. I think this is going to be closer than people think, but I still think the Titans are going to win this one, and maybe they'll pull away at the end. But give me the Titans at home.
Yeah, Titans as well. I just think their kind of smash mouth style is going to be maybe too much for a Houston team that's a little bit punchless right now. So Titans.
Texans are off a bye. Still got Tyrod Taylor.
Uh-oh.
Nah, give me the Titans.
Oh, no. Come on. Do it. I thought you were going to do it.
And honestly, it's more Tennessee's defense. I mean,
Mhm.
look at the last couple of weeks, doing a good job against the Rams, the 3 points against the Chiefs. Their front seven, very quietly, I think has been more impressive in their offense. So Tennessee wins this with defense.
Well, and on a side note, I think we're really going to really learn a lot about Ryan Tannehill over these next few weeks, because I think he's, it's been hard to judge him overall. It's like, okay, is he a product of Derrick Henry and A.J. Brown and all this, or is he what his stat line suggests, one of the elite quarterbacks in the league? Dealing with those offensive injuries, no Julio Jones, no obviously no Derrick Henry, albeit they do have a guy, Adrian Peterson, who used to be pretty good. It's going to be interesting to see how he plays this week, certainly next week against the Patriots, and kind of as he continues without those guys. So, but I do think they win this one. I was really hoping someone would pick against them, but oh well, Ricky. Oh well, maybe next time. Next, we have the Minnesota Vikings hosting the Green Bay Packers. Now, I did make this pick on Friday, and I'm going to stick with my pick. Much like the Patriots and say the Dolphins, there's no matter how good or bad either team is, these matchups are generally pretty interesting and never really one-sided. There's always some drama to it. I think in this situation, considering Aaron Rodgers not only is dealing with the toe injury, not only doesn't have Aaron Jones, hasn't practiced much the last 2 or 3 weeks, going against a pretty good Minnesota team. This isn't a bad Minnesota team. It's not a great Minnesota team. But at home, I'm going to give the edge to the Vikings, and I think they win this one. So give me the Vikings.
I know Minnesota's played Green Bay pretty tough the last couple of years, couple wins in Lambeau recently, but even though I picked Cousins to have more yards, we didn't pick touchdowns. I think scoring, you look at the Packers defense right now, I just trust them just a little bit more than Minnesota. So definitely think it'll be tight, 1-score game, but I'm going to go Green Bay.
We were talking about earlier, if Minnesota wins this game, it's more of the lopsided variety. And as Ian pointed out, the Vikings have lost all 5 games by a combined total of 18 points. So if this game is close, it's not Kirk Cousins' fault. I just trust Aaron Rodgers a little bit more, and Mason Crosby's the better field goal kicker. So Green Bay wins by a field goal.
But add a little wrinkle. He hasn't been kicking too well. He's kind of going through that Steven Gostkowski phase that, where he seemed to miss at least one kick like every game for half a season. So
do
maybe
the Vikings still have that kicker who missed the chip shot in Arizona in week 2? It's Mike Zimmer. Mike Zimmer seems always find a way to screw up late.
Fair enough. Great point. Next, speaking of lopsided, I don't know. I don't know where that insult was going, but I was trying to insult the Jets, but then I also saw the Dolphins. But Jets are hosting the Dolphins. I think, unfortunately for the Jets, Flacco isn't going to dig them out of the ditch that they're in right now. And I think Miami is playing a little bit better. They've won 2 games in a row. I think they're feeling themselves pretty well, and they get a fairly even matchup against the Jets. So I think Miami goes into New York and wins this one. So give me the Dolphins.
Yeah, I agree. Not just Flacco starting, but like you said, Dolphins playing better lately. I think a lot of that has to do with defense, kind of getting guys back to playing multiple roles like they were last season. Xavier Howard and Andrew Van Ginkel, kind of guys like that, getting moved all over the formation. So yeah, I like Miami to continue to win today.
If Miami didn't end their season with New Orleans on the road, Tennessee on the road, and New England, you look at these next 3: next 4: Jets, Panthers, Giants, by Jets. I mean, this is a really good opportunity for Miami and a really big opportunity for Tua. He needs a big game today, and Joe Flacco stinks. Give me the Dolphins.
We can all agree on that. Philadelphia hosting New Orleans. We talked about them a little bit earlier in the game. I think Philadelphia, I'm not jumping as Ricky suggested, not me personally, but as people have, I'm not really going all in on Philadelphia. I still have a lot of questions. New Orleans, I think their defense is really good. I'm still, maybe it's just foolish to doubt a Sean Payton coach team, but I still have my reservations about what this offense can do. consistently. I think Philadelphia at home. I think they're going to pick up the win. So give me the Eagles.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't really think New Orleans is a horrible team, but not just the quarterback situation, but you look at how Michael Thomas's absence has affected this team. It's just too much, I think, to come back from when Alvin Kamara is out today, and
too, yeah.
Both offensive tackles. So yeah, it's I think just one of those days, kind of like Ricky said about Baltimore. I don't think there's enough going New Orleans' way right now. So got to go with the Eagles.
I think I'm going to go with more of Ian's logic here, and it's between Sean Payton and Nick Sirianni. I'm going to trust Sean Payton. This is a Saints team that has lost its last 2 games without Jameis Winston by 4 points. So I don't think they're as bad as people think, and they need this game. Especially, again, they're going to play Buffalo on Thanksgiving, then they play Dallas. Saints lose this game, their playoff hopes are in big jeopardy. So just by sheer desperation, I'm scared the Eagles haven't won at home this year, but I'm going to take the Saints.
All right. Next, we have Cam Newton and the Carolina Panthers hosting Ron Rivera and the Washington football team. Yes, of course. We know the storylines. Ron Rivera, former coach of the Carolina Panthers during Cam Newton's heyday with the team. He came in and kind of, did what he does. He took advantage of the limited opportunities that he had last week, scoring 2 touchdowns. Ricky, you and I both watched him to quite a bit of an extent last season with the Patriots. I think obviously it's hard to match his running ability, and I think combined with Christian McCaffrey, that's going to create some fun offense for this team. And I think this defense is getting better. And I think, look, Washington, I think probably peaked last week. Big win over the defending Super Bowl champions. As much as I like Ron Rivera's edge when it comes to game planning for a Cam Newton-led offense, I just think Carolina right now is a little bit better team, and I think they're trending upwards as opposed to Washington, who I think is, was just a nice little, escape from reality last week, and now they're going to be right back to it. So give me the Panthers at home against the football team.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going as far as Washington peaked. I think, the win over Tampa, that was kind of their Super Bowl, given they were close to them throughout that wild card game somewhat last year. So I think this is a drop back down to earth a little bit. And I just think Carolina, they're on a roll right now. And I think everybody's just kind of just playing complimentary football for them. So just a better team. And I got to go with Cam Newton over Taylor Heineke today.
I think I know, Ian, you and I have seen Cam firsthand. I still need to see him start a whole game and see what he can actually do. I think people got way too excited over 4 passes and a couple of runs last week against a Cardinal defense. That team is just dealing with a bunch of injuries right now. The problem is Washington doesn't have Chase Young. And I think that's the part that's a little scary in this game. And Taylor Heineke has to deal with the Panthers front 7. I think Carolina wins it, but I think they win it with defense more than they do offense.
Next, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars hosting San Francisco 49ers. 49ers.
Yeah, I mean, this feels like one of those picks that I've done quick, and it ends up being an upset. But I don't know. I got to go with the Niners still.
We talk about teams that are in the mix for that final playoff spot, and very quietly, San Francisco is back in that mix. They seem to find it. I know no Elijah Mitchell today, but it's Kyle Shanahan. They just find a running back, plug him in, and boom, he'll run for 100 yards. Niners don't have many games left with teams over 500. This is a prime spot for them to make a run in what will be they can't look ahead to a play-in game essentially next week with Minnesota. So give me San Francisco.
Next, we have the Raiders hosting the Bengals. I think last week may have been an indication of the Raiders team finally having everything catch up to them. Over the last month or so, they have been in the headlines for everything but football reasons. And for the most part, they've persevered. But I thought last week was just kind of your classic, all of a sudden the Raiders are just the Raiders again. And I think this is a pretty tough matchup for them, even at home against a pretty explosive Cincinnati Bengals team. So give me the Bengals on the road.
Yeah, I don't think the 2 losses Cincinnati had before their bye is going to hurt them as much as some people think. This feels like a game where Joe Burrow just kind of has a classic big day through the air, just kind of opportunistic against a Raiders team that doesn't really feel like they're adjusting much, kind of still running the same cover three that Gus Bradley likes to run. So I think Bengals will put up a lot of points today and they get the job done.
Both teams going in the same bad direction. When you're having these kind of teams, it's who's coming off the bye. It's Cincinnati. And who do you take, Joe Burrow or Derek Carr? I know both defenses are bad, at least right now. Cincinnati's defense in the wrong direction, Vegas in the wrong direction. So between Burrow and Carr, I'm going to take Burrow and take Cincinnati. Although this is a big one for Zach Taylor. They need this game. Otherwise, I think his job is in question. So give me Cincinnati.
Next, we have the Chiefs hosting the Dallas Cowboys. Dak Prescott versus Patrick Mahomes. Like I said before, if you check out our friends over at Tally Site, you'll know that I am a Chiefs expert, considered a Chiefs expert based on my picks and my predictions. So whatever I say, you should probably listen to. I'm going to take Dallas in this one. I think, again, the game last week was a must win for the Chiefs. They had to win that game to get back, but this Dallas offense is pretty explosive, even without Ezekiel Elliott, even without Amari Cooper. I think Dak Prescott's still going to be able to get some on this Chiefs defense. Most importantly, though, I think Dallas is going to be able to create turnovers. And I think that's ultimately what's going to lose this game for Kansas City. I think one too many turnovers is going to do them in. Should be a classic game. I think this is going to be perhaps the game of the week, but I think Dallas is going to pull this one out on the road.
Yeah, I'm going Dallas as well, just because I think the offense, it is going to be too much. I think overall, if this is a game where the Chiefs kind of, like you said, either turnovers or last week there was some drives they should have probably got touchdowns on. They settled for field goals. So I think any hiccups like that, it's just going to be too much to come back from in what could be a tight game. But if I'm wrong, I'll probably be pretty obnoxious all week. So kind of more of taking Dallas just to see if Kansas City can kind of prove themselves here in a big game, kind of for the first time all year.
Hey, right or wrong, I'm pretty obnoxious each and every week. So do what you got to do, man.
I agree with Braden that the Chiefs have more to prove. I see people saying Dallas has more to prove. What does Dallas exactly have to prove? They've won tough games all season long. If they don't win a game in Arrowhead, it doesn't make me think anything different of them in the NFC going forward, because this is a tough place to play. I think Dallas might also be looking at this game kind of with the long-term view in mind. They do have to play on Thanksgiving. Maybe that's why a couple of guys aren't going to play today. Amari Cooper's side that maybe could play Thursday, possibly. So with the Chiefs being the more desperate team, and Patrick Mahomes is one of those quarterbacks that I think he's found his mojo in the second half against Vegas. And when he's one of those streaky guys, once he finds it, things start to break in the right direction. I think Dallas is just running into the Chiefs at the wrong time. So give me with the layer back too as well. Chiefs are win today.
All right, next we have Seattle hosting Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins less Arizona Cardinals. I think prior to knowing Kyler Murray was out, I did pick the Cardinals. I'm going to switch my pick because I had the right to do so, given the new information provided to us. And I'm going to take Seattle. I don't think it's going to be necessarily an impressive win. I'm not really that enamored with the Seahawks overall, defensively, even offensively. I think Mr. I trained 19 hours a day is a little too phony for me, and I just don't think I just don't think they're as good as he thinks he is. So I think Seattle wins this one, but it's not going to be that. It's going to be kind of an ugly game without the other two playing for Arizona.
Yeah, I don't know what to really expect with either of his teams. I'm going to stick with Arizona just because I think they have played Seattle pretty well over the years with Kingsbury, and I just think you look at I think you look at the Seattle defense. If there's any chance for James Conner to break off a big run, or somebody like Zach Ertz maybe to get a long touchdown catch and break some tackles, I think there's definitely a big chance for that given Seattle's defense. So I don't know how they'll do it, but I think Cardinals will find a way.
Kyler Murray's not on track to play. Colt McCoy's dealing with a pectoral issue. Even though Colt McCoy did beat the Seahawks last year on the road as a member of the New York Giants, I just don't think – I want to say Arizona bounces back after the effort they gave last week against Carolina, which is awful. But is Seattle really going to score no points again after the snowy Lambeau Field last week? I agree with Ian on Wilson. I think there was a little over exaggerated, but it's still Metcalf, it's still Lockett, it's still those guys. Seattle squeaks it out, but it's not a pretty game.
Last but not least, we have Pittsburgh. We have Los Angeles, not San Diego, the Los Angeles Chargers at home. Well, Big Ben's back. I don't know how much of a plus that is for certainly an upgrade over Mason Rudolph, but how much of an upgrade? Well, again, this isn't 25-year-old Ben Roethlisberger. This is 37-year-old, more like 50-year-old Ben Roethlisberger. I think Los Angeles, I think the Chargers win this one at home. I think Justin Herbert has a pretty good day against a pretty banged-up Pittsburgh defense.
This is a weird one just because Pittsburgh usually either pretty lucky or just always finds a way to know what to do in close games. I think they're 5-0-1 this year is what I saw in games decided by one score. And you look at the Chargers' history in those moments, it's definitely a lot better with Herbert. Just think there's too much injuries with Pittsburgh, and even as much as the Chargers have kind of struggled lately, I think their B game is better than the Steelers' B game by quite a bit. So I'll take the Chargers.
See, Ben's definitely an upgrade at quarterback because regardless of how old Ben Roethlisberger is, Mason Rudolph tied the Lions. That alone should tell you just how bad Mason Rudolph is. Why would Mike Tomlin let Mason Rudolph throw 50 times against the Lions? I have no clue. But besides that, Chargers' run defense is bad, but Pittsburgh's defense has nobody. So I tend to go with the bad run defense over the nobodies. So give me the Chargers.
Well, there you have it, folks. We just told you everything that's going to happen today. So why even watch? Why don't you just watch this over and over again and you'll know exactly what happened. No, thank you everyone for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Stay tuned here in about 15 minutes or so. Our good buddy Kyle Senra is going to be on talking fantasy football right here on at Full Press NFL on Twitter. And of course, you can watch on our YouTube channel, on our twitch.tv channel. It's / Full Press Coverage. And of course, if you're a TikToker, yes, that's right. We got a TikTok. I don't know how to use it yet, but we got one. So if you want to follow us, it's at Full Press Coverage. Check it out. We're going to probably be adding some stuff to that and try to make ourselves, look like all the cool kids out there doing stuff like that. So thank you, everyone. Have a great Sunday. Enjoy the games, and we will talk to you